Across the Potomac River from Washington, D.C. in Arlington, Virginia, lies 624 acres of land that has been used for more than 1.5 centuries as a final resting place for more than 400,000 active duty service members, veterans, and their families. Service to country is the common thread that binds all who are remembered and honored at the Arlington National Cemetery. As far as the eye can see, tombstones are set in neat rows commemorating the sacrifices of people who laid down their lives in the name of justice and freedom. Laid to rest are many people you more than likely have never heard of. There's even a monument dedicated to the American service members who have died without their remains being identified, commonly known as the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. But there are also some famous names buried at the cemetery. Names like Lee Marvin, best known for his Hollywood acting in the mid-60s, who also fought in World War II and was a Purple Heart recipient. President John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert Kennedy, who were both World War II veterans. Anita Newcomb McGee, who was the first female surgeon in the U.S. Army and who also trained nurses for the Japanese Red Cross. And Thurgood Marshall, who was famous for arguing the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education case, and who was the first African American Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. I understand it's quite a sight. Quite a sight to look out over all those burial plots and quietly acknowledge the contributions of all these many people to humankind. Quite a sight and quite inspiring. That's what's taking place in this morning's text from the book of Hebrews. The author spends all of the 11th chapter recounting ancient heroes and sheroes of faith. There was Noah, who built a ship in the middle of dry land and who was warned about something he couldn't see and acted on what he was told. And there was Sarah, who was able to become pregnant, old woman as she was at the time, because she believed the one who made the promise would also fulfill that promise. There were the people of Israel who, by an act of faith, walked through the Red Sea on dry ground. And there was a prostitute named Rahab who, by an act of faith, welcomed the Israelite spies and who consequently escaped the destruction that came on the city of Jericho. The author of this morning's text points out that there are many more besides these champions of faith, more than there is time to tell about them. To sit and meditate on all these great historical figures must have been for the reading audience like standing in Arlington National Cemetery and pondering the great people buried there. It gives you pause. It makes you grateful and appreciative of the sacrifice of those who have gone before you, and it inspires you to be a better person. In the latest of the Harry Potter movies, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, there's a scene in which Harry is gifted with one of the final artifacts of the Deathly Hallows called the Resurrection Stone. As Harry grasps the stone in his hand, suddenly he's surrounded by the many people who had died for the cause. He sees his father and mother who died defending his infant self from Lord Voldemort 18 years earlier. He sees his godfather, Sirius Black, who had been murdered a couple years earlier by one of Voldemort's minions, and Professor Lupin, who had died that very night battling Voldemort's forces. "Why are you here?" he asks. And his mother replies, we never left. You see, they had been with Harry in his heart all along and would stay with him even as he made one last attempt to defeat Voldemort. Their presence and Harry's awareness of their presence helped him march toward his enemy in the course that had been marked out for him. This is what the author of this morning's text is trying to convey to you and me. We are being invited to call forth the many people, the great cloud of witnesses, if you will, not to freeze us in a state of awe and wonder, but to provide us with the courage and the faith to move forward, to run the race that has been given for us to run it with the knowledge that those who have gone before us have never left us. They watch over us and infuse into us the faith that was theirs, a faith that gives us the courage to never give up. The author of the book of Hebrews wrote to a specific audience. They had already faced persecution in the past. Some of them were suffering in the present, and the author's expectation was that more of them would suffer, perhaps even more severely, in the future. The readers are urged to draw on the courage, strength, and commitment of the great cloud of witnesses of faith who had gone before them. And when you and I face discouragement in our own lives, we should do no less. But we LGBTQ folk have our own saints from whom we can draw our inspiration. Let me give you just a few. Love between men is celebrated in the Bible with the story of David and Jonathan, who lived about 3,000 years ago, but who still inspire LGBT people of faith. Love between women is honored in the lives of the biblical figures of Ruth and Naomi, with Ruth's famous vows to Naomi often used in both heterosexual and same-sex weddings. And Joan of Arc, a gay icon and girl power hero, was a tough cross-dressing teenage warrior who led the medieval French army to victory when she was only 17. Pioneering gay rights activist Harvey Milk, who was assassinated almost 38 years ago, was the first and most famous openly gay male elected official in California and perhaps the world. He became the public face of the LGBT rights movement. Bayard Rustin was a black gay man and chief organizer of the 1963 Civil Rights March on Washington. Pushed into the background because he was openly gay in a more homophobic era, Rustin has been called an invisible hero, a lost prophet, and brother outsider. He summed up his philosophy when he said, "We need in every community a group of angelic troublemakers." 21-year-old Matthew Shepard brought international attention to anti-gay hate crimes when he was brutally attacked near Laramie, Wyoming on October 6th and 7th, 1998, and dying 6 days later. The two men who tortured and murdered him later claimed that they were driven temporarily insane by gay panic due to Shepard's alleged sexual advances. David Kato, Ugandan LGBT rights activist, considered a father of Uganda's gay rights movement, was beaten to death in 2011 after American evangelicals had helped to stir up the hostility in the country by promoting a law imposing the death penalty for homosexuality. The inspiring stories of these and many other courageous LGBTQ saints and martyrs can be found online at Kittredge Cherry's Jesus in Love website. Or you can check out the latest book at our lending library downstairs, written by MCC's moderator, Reverend Elder Nancy Wilson, in which she tells story after story about the early days of MCC. After reading it, I felt encouraged and inspired as a gay person of faith and a member of this denomination. I felt surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses and was able to lay aside every weight that holds me down and holds me back from running the race that God has set before me. So the next time you feel discouraged, you may try tapping into your own cloud of witnesses. It may be a parent, grandparent, or a family member in whose life you always found inspiration. Or it may be a coach or school teacher who believed in you when no one else did. These saints who have gone before us have never left us. They are in our hearts, and they always will be. So give thanks for them. Give thanks for the great cloud of witnesses whom God has placed in your lives, and run with perseverance the race that has been set before us. Amen.